Hello and welcome to CII's webinar, Leveraging PDRI Matters and Accuracy Factors for Projects in Front-End Planning During COVID-19. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. Some general information. This webinar is being recorded, so we'll keep everybody on mute. The material will be available on our blog page, which is www.construction-institute.org/blog. On your control panel, you'll see a section called Questions. Please feel free to enter your questions there and we'll address them as we go and at the end of the webinar. I'm Mike Pappas, CII's Associate Director for Deployment. With us today, we have Sandra MacGillivray from Valency and Valerie Weaver with Marathon Petroleum. Tyler Gowan is going to introduce our speakers and present a safety moment. Go ahead, Tyler.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mike. So as mentioned, my name is Tyler Gowan, and I'm part of the team here at Valency. So I'm going to start by introducing our speakers today. Sandra leads our team of advisors, facilitators, and course developers to help our clients implement best practices from the Construction Industry Institute. Over the past decade, she has had the opportunity to serve on 4 research teams with the Construction Industry Institute, develop implementation and training content to support many of CII's best practices. She currently serves on CII's Board of Advisors. Valerie Weaver is a project management subject matter expert at Marathon Petroleum. In this role, Valerie supports Marathon's 16 refineries in the execution of their project portfolio. She leads the project insurance activities for large projects, develops and implements best practices for project execution, and is the CII implementation champion for Marathon Petroleum. Valerie has worked with Endeavor, Tesoro, Altamar, Tosco, and Uniclor. While at Endeavor, she led CII best practice implementation efforts, and Endeavor received the 2018 CII Implementation Award. In 2019, Valerie was a step ahead honoree from the Manufacturing Institute. Both awards were based on her efforts to drive capital efficiency within Endeavor's major project organization. In Valerie's present capital project assurance role, she frequently applies CII's Project Definition Rating Index (PDRI) tool to determine if large projects are ready for gate approval and full funding. Now, before I hand it off to them, I'm going to take a moment to do a brief safety moment here. So, one thing that's happening now that we're moving well into summer over here in North America, we have to be a little considerate of the ultraviolet rays that are harmful during sunny periods of time. In as little as 15 minutes, the sun's UV rays can damage your skin. There are a few ways that we recommend taking precautions to make sure that you're not getting the effects of the UV rays. First one, of course, jumping into shade whenever you've been in sun for prolonged periods of time. Make sure to wear sunscreen and clothes that are tightly woven to make sure that the UV rays cannot go through. Wearing a sun hat, sunglasses, and applying SPF 15 or higher can also help before going outside. Taking these into effect before going outside decreases your likelihood of sunburns, skin cancer, which includes melanoma. Now, with that short note, I'm going to hand this over to Sandra MacGillivray to take our presentation from here.
All right, thank you very much, Tyler. Well, first off, if you haven't worked with us at Valency, just a little bit about what we do. Our organization very much has a mission to make your capital projects a source of excitement and growth, and try and get rid of that anxiety and risk that tends to follow capital projects. And we do this by providing our clients with implementation support and training on best practices from the Construction Industry Institute. And we focus on those that have a proven performance impact for projects. So to kick off the webinar today, I'd like to focus on our objectives. So it's a challenging time right now, and so many of the pillars of our capital project world are going through an upheaval. So what does that mean for organizations that rely on the Project Definition Rating Index as a means of ensuring high quality scope definition coming through front-end planning? Over the course of this webinar, Valerie and I look forward to sharing how to leverage the latest PDRI innovations and what we've learned to make the best possible use of virtual technology in conducting PDRI sessions. So we'll start by sharing some of the challenges that organizations are facing with projects that are currently in front-end planning. We'll walk through some of the key risks to scope maturity in front-end planning and how to ensure these risks are discussed in your review of PDRI elements. Next, we'll introduce the new PDRI MATRS template with a specific focus on leveraging the new accuracy factors to assess how a team is functioning in the midst of COVID-19. And finally, we're going to share some of the virtual facilitation best practices that you can adopt in conducting PDRI sessions during this turbulent period. So here we are, 5 months into a global pandemic that presents our projects currently in front-end planning with some of the most challenging circumstances that at least I've experienced in my working career. And it's hitting us from many different angles. Some of the most challenging that we've been working through are, first of all, figuring out how to maintain strong communication and team collaboration without co-location of all of our team members. For a lot of us, it's a more stressful working climate with everyone at home and trying to carve out a work area with the least number of distractions. And key to front-end planning, working through a virtual communication with all of our stakeholder groups, from operations and maintenance to construction to procurement, and even our consultants and our contractors. Part of the journey at Valency over these months has been engaging with our clients who've implemented PDRI and understanding the specific challenges that they need to address. We conducted this survey back in June and found that the most prominent challenges from the perspective of our PDRI facilitators were maintaining team alignment, working through new or increased risks facing their projects, the quality of the deliverables that were being developed, and supporting projects that were either being paused or stopped as a result of COVID-19. Now, if there's anything that I've learned this year, it's not to assume that whatever your biggest challenge was 60 days ago is still your biggest challenge today. So we'd like to put this poll question out to everyone here today. So which of the challenges below are the projects and front-end planning experiencing in your organization? So we've got some of the top ones here. This isn't necessarily all of them or all-encompassing. So I'd encourage you, if you've got other top challenges, please use the question box on the, it's on the right-hand side of my screen, but you'll see the question box that you can submit as well. So Mike, whatever you feel like we've got a good response there, I'll look for your guidance.
Okay. Yeah, we've got about 65% that have voted.
Okay.
Now we're at about 70%. So we can share the results here. Sandra, you'll see them in the polls section. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So probably we're seeing more projects that have been paused or stopped than we were 60 days ago. So that's an interesting observation. But maintaining team alignment is still a top challenge for most of our over half of our participants today. Are there any other kind of interesting ones in the questions that would be good to share, Mike?
No, we didn't get anybody typing in the questions on this one.
Okay, no worries. Well, I think we have consensus that we've got a pretty interesting period ahead, and pretty consistent that number one challenge that we've seen for several months now has been maintaining team alignment. So I guess the question is, can PDRI be used to help assess how a team is actually functioning in the face of COVID-19? So with that, let's transition to learn a little bit more about PDRI MATRS and our new accuracy factors. Okay, so now our webinar is focused today on the latest innovations in PDRI, and this is a practice with over 25 years of history with CII. PDRI has given organizations around the world a methodology to measure the level of scope definition in a manner that ensures a very comprehensive review of scope. And when best practices are followed in conducting PDRI sessions, the methodology also gives us a way to quickly identify gaps and take appropriate action. And when PDRIs are performed consistently across your portfolio of projects, we can systematically address risk, starting right in the front-end planning. Now, if you're new to PDRI, there are a number of resources available that can help provide a good introduction to this practice. So please check out, there's a number of resources, but one you can use is our white paper called Introduction to PDRI, and it's available online at valencyinc.com/PDRI. Now, regardless whether you're new to PDRI or not, please stay with us, because even if you're new to this, I'm confident that this discussion that we have to follow will still be a valuable step in your learning about PDRI. So CII has published 4 PDRI, four templates that are specific to our needs in 4 different categories. We have templates for industrial projects, for building projects, infrastructure, and manufacturing and life sciences projects. That being projects that are frequently a hybrid of industrial and building scope. Regardless of what PDRI template you utilize today, we believe that there are some common at-risk areas in our projects, and that the PDRI process can help us to systematically review those here in COVID-19. So we're going to transition now to talk about some of the emerging risks that we see with help of one of the industry's most seasoned PDRI facilitators that I've had the pleasure of working with, Valerie Weaver. Thanks for joining me, Valerie. So the first element that we've selected to touch on today from our PDRI MATRS industrial template is called market strategy. Now, regardless of what template you use today, there'll be an equivalent element. If you're using the buildings template, it's called probably business plan and economic analysis. If you're using the infrastructure template, probably closest to the need and purpose documentation element. So Valerie, have you seen a shift in the types of discussions that teams are having when you get to this market strategy element?
Well, I would say this is probably one of the biggest areas of focus in our PDRI reviews. Historically, when we've had these reviews, the business case has already been developed pretty conclusively. But what we're seeing now is a lot more churn, right? Particularly in my industry, which is refining, right? Demand has shifted. So pricing has shifted, and there's really been an intense need to revisit the business economics. So I see a lot of discussion on this topic, the need to consider sensitivity cases far more than in the past. The other thing that kind of comes up with this particular element is, projects that are where there's a need to go to market quickly had historically been more of a schedule-driven type objective. So we're seeing a big shift to a cost-driven project objective. So that tends to also create a pretty significant change in just strategies with how the projects are executed. So lots of good conversation on this element.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just to give kind of our audience a bit of context, can you share kind of what points in the front-end planning process you use PDRI in your process?
Oh, sure. So we use PDRI on projects of all sizes. I tend to focus on applying it to the larger projects. So we define that as projects greater than $25 million. For those projects, we require a PDRI at the end of FEL2 and again at the end of FEL3, right before the project is fully funded.
Okay, so really 2 great spots to be able to revisit this market strategy as things evolve.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, let's transition over to our next element that I think we have some good commonality across the industry around site characteristics, those that are available versus required. And again, I think regardless of the template, you're going to see a similar element that talks to this. So Valerie, what impact has COVID-19 had on the teams that you've worked with related to assessing site characteristics?
Yeah, so site characteristics are typically one of the most important things to really define early in project development to get a good solid estimate for project funding. But what we're finding is the project teams have limited access to the sites. And so, they've become a bit more dependent on past 3D models of sites, and we're seeing some delays on confirming measurements. That also kind of translates into, you know, a reduced ability to determine, I don't know what the physical characteristics, you know, if you've got pipe racks, are they full, you know, do you have underground interferences? It's just a whole host of issues that we've historically addressed through site visits. So with that, a lot more dependency on institutional knowledge, you know, the need for people with a lot of site knowledge and experience. So, you know, seeing these things delayed from perhaps they were done in FEL2 previously and they're being done in FEL3. We're still trying to do it before full project funding, but later than when we would consider ideal.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense given kind of what we're all trying to work through right now. All right, well, let's take a bit of a dive into kind of the next topic, which is the evolution of PDRI tools that takes us to the PDRI MATRS Industrial. So we've had 6 different PDRI templates that have been published over the past 25 years. The most recent publication was in 2019, and it was an enhancement to the existing PDRI Industrial template, and it's called PDRI MATRS Industrial. So the PDRI MATRS template introduced a secondary measure in addition to the total PDRI score that we were all used to, and it was really ideal for large industrial projects. So kind of the parts of that MATRS score were, first of all, a maturity score related to the front-end engineering design deliverables, and along with that came definition level scoring guidance that was provided for each of the elements. So that area of development has really helped improve the consistency in scoring across industrial projects and organizations that utilize it. The other addition with this template was the accuracy score. And the new accuracy section provided a means for us to evaluate the degree of confidence that a team has in that overall scope definition package. So the accuracy factors were broken down into 4 different categories. First one related to project leadership, then focused into the project execution team. It then talks to what were the project management processes that were followed, and finally, understanding the project resources that were available during front-end planning. So the combination of that maturity score and the accuracy score gave us the MATRS score. But today, we're just going to dig deeper on the broader applicability of those accuracy factors to any large capital project. The new accuracy section includes 27 factors or questions that are organized into these 4 categories that I introduced. Each of the factors is weighted based on CII's research results, but they're calculated as a percentage. So through the research, the target score at the end of FEL3 or detailed scope is 76% or higher. So a little bit different than our traditional PDRI scores, and that the higher the score on accuracy, the better, out of a total of 100%. The definition levels are also a bit different in how we would evaluate accuracy factors. But I think when we take a look at it, the intended application is very similar. A 0 means it's not applicable. A 1 in the case of accuracy factors means the team's very high performing based on the criteria. And a 5 would mean that the results are not acceptable. Now, Valerie, you shared in our discussions that you've developed a strategy for how to use the accuracy score to help identify risk. Can you tell us a little bit about the approach that you've taken?
Yeah, so typically, well, you know, we've been convening virtually, obviously, given the circumstances. We will have the extended team virtually complete the PDRI in its entirety. And then at the conclusion of that, we will either, well, we always reduce the number of people that are participating in the PDRI to a much, much smaller group, and then proceed on to do this accuracy assessment. Sometimes we will even, you know, break and reconvene on a separate day. So I think the big thing is you really want to reduce the participants down to the leadership folks, typically the PM on the engineering side, the PM on the owner project side, and then possibly with their supervisors, maybe somebody is responsible for the business relationship on the engineering contractor side, and then the engineering supervisor on the project side. That's the smaller group that we then go through these particular questions with.
Okay. And are you kind of, focused on the aggregate score overall, or do you kind of look for outliers? Do you have any kind of guidance on that side?
Yeah, so, typically we're looking for things that are going to put the project in jeopardy. So the 3s and the 4s, those are the ones that really stimulate the most conversation. And I found that, oftentimes these are things that the project leads are already aware of, but they haven't really stopped to talk about. So it really allows you to put added emphasis on, what I call some of the, the project team fundamentals that are really essential for delivering the project in the next phase, and developing some strategies to possibly improve those areas.
That's great. Well, we all need more chances to pause and reflect in this period of hyperactivity, I think. So that's great.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and oftentimes, right, the things that come up are, turnover of personnel. Turnover is particularly damaging right now, and we already have a lot of things in play. And then, communication issues often surface here as well.
Okay, very good. Well, let's dive a little deeper into some of the factors that we maybe would consider to be at risk given our current circumstances. The first one that I wanted to dive into here was talking about co-location. So within the accuracy factors, co-location refers to the team being able to reflect on how well they implemented the related practices. And the principle being that team members tend to develop a shared purpose, goals, and culture if they have an opportunity to co-locate. So I'm sure if your organization's anything like ours, Valerie, it's been pretty challenging over the past several months. What have you seen in terms of team feedback on any impacts they've felt from not being able to co-locate?
Yeah, so as an owner, we've always put a lot of emphasis on having our people co-located at the engineering office. So it's really created a big shift from the norm. And I've kind of seen two groups. I actually did a PDRI last week, very, very seasoned team that has worked with a particular engineering office for a long time. And so they know one another, they're accustomed to working one another. They've developed some, more advanced virtual communication approaches, and they seem to have been very effective in, working through the issues. I think the big communication issue that they're always concerned about is disconnects between the disciplines. And those are often conversation across desks or at lunchtime. And they've overcome that with, daily update communication type approaches virtually. And then the other camp is, groups that either have less experienced owner personnel on project teams because we have seen turnover, or perhaps they're using an engineering office for the first time and they're developing the relationships with that particular office. I think that second case is the one where we have more conversation around how we can work through to improve, essentially the communication plan to overcome that co-location issue. Okay.
So yeah, in the accuracy factors, this next factor here, communication, closely follows on the heels of the co-location discussion. So it does naturally kind of help that. Well, what do we do about it if it's an issue discussion?
It really does, and I think as somebody said at a recent PDRI, well, you can always improve communication. Having that conversation is always of benefit, but now I think it's even more important that we really focus on that.
Excellent. All right, so another accuracy factor that we found to be really valuable is talking about priorities. So if we can flip to the next slide there, Tyler. All right, So on the priority side, the normal kind of discussion we start with is, did the team feel like they had clear priorities on cost, schedule, and required project features? Valerie, have you seen any issues in this area that have come through this COVID-19 period?
Yeah, I think all of the above have changed, right? We've gone, I had mentioned earlier, from schedule to cost. So that's a big shift, and that's further exacerbated by perhaps some downtime. Well, we're going to shut the project down for a year and then we're going to restart it. So that brings in to play, how do you most efficiently shut down a project for a short period of time so that you can efficiently pick it back up and not create a lot of rework. And then on the project feature side, a lot of value engineering going on to really, make sure that the project scope meets our new business needs. So typically, that's creating churn, something that we really try to avoid later in project development. So yeah, all of the above priorities, seeing a lot of shift across the board.
Okay, very good. Well, another one here, and I think you helped us kind of unpack this one a little bit earlier, but I think it's just really valuable, relates to local knowledge. And sometimes this is having an understanding of the site history, but most of the time it also means being able to access and visit and evaluate that site. And the principle behind this one is that access to the site gives the team that hands-on review, allows them to do field verification, site characteristics. So Valerie, you shared kind of a little bit about what this has looked like. Have people kind of come up with strategies to help kind of work through this, or to work together, work cooperatively with operations personnel?
Yeah, I think, the key is you just really need to have experienced personnel if you can have it. And then in some cases where it's not enough, we've devised some strategies where we can access the site, through one person, perhaps, small group, really trying to minimize that particular factor. But, it's just really important that the group is tracking their assumptions and they have some definitive plan on when they're going to be allowed to shore up that gap, even if it occurs late. So yeah, this is an ongoing issue, and experience, it's hard to substitute for experience in this case.
Well, it sounds like a really valuable discussion to have in FEL too, in that first review.
No, absolutely. And, and I would say having construction personnel even more involved, we've always tried to really drive the construction driven engineering type approach, but, it's even more important here to get that input early from people who've had construction knowledge and experience for that particular location. Okay,
very good. So it's been about 18 months that my team has been using the PDRI MATRS. And what we concluded pretty early on was that these accuracy factors can add a lot of value in almost any PDRI session. So we're going to be introducing accuracy as an optional section that you can use with any PDRI template and our upcoming release of our Carve software this fall. But in the interim, here's the steps that we're using, and I would highly recommend, to consider for any organization. If you see value in stepping back, having a healthy conversation about team dynamics, much like what Valerie shared with us. So the steps that we're following would, first of all, if you're doing buildings, you're doing infrastructure, it doesn't really matter what it is, conduct your normal PDRI session using your current template. Then I think the secret is to take a break, and you'll have to decide whether that break means you come back the same day and finish off, or if that means you come back the next morning or the next day. But I think when you reconvene, Valerie's talked a little bit about kind of what that core project team can look like, so that you've got the right folks at the table to go through that accuracy section. Now, the step at the end is when you prepare kind of your PDRI summary report or an executive summary. As a facilitator, you do have to bring the two together in terms of your PDRI score and the accuracy score, but I think you've got an ideal opportunity to kind of combine those action items and the risks and prevent a whole view of kind of what this looks like. So I know, Valerie, we've had some different discussions about kind of how long it takes to go through these questions. If people are thinking about what does that mean kind of to my agenda or the duration, what's your guidance from your experience?
Yeah, so for the PDRI proper, I typically recommend 4 hours. And I allow the team to break it up into two-hour sessions if that, works better for them. But I often do the PDRI in just 1 4-hour session and convene breaks. Usually, I'll ask the team and they'll say, every hour and a half to 2 hours. They're pretty used to virtual all-day meetings nowadays. So they tend to opt for the longer intervals, surprisingly enough.
Okay.
And then, yeah, for the accuracy assessment, if I've got a really well-honed group that's very experienced, working together very effectively, it's been as low as, say, maybe 45 minutes. But, if you encounter a group that does have not even substantial issues, but they want to have dialogue around a couple issues, I agree, up to 90 minutes is a very fair estimate for that.
All right. Very good. Well, I think just to kind of summarize, so if you're new to PDRI Matters and you kind of want to get some more details on how it works and what's there, we've got a quick fact sheet that you're welcome to download, valencyinc.com/PDRI-matters, MATRS. The other 2 areas that I encourage you to go check out in the CII knowledge base, the final publication was under Research Team 361, PDRI Maturity and Accuracy Total Rating System. But there was also preliminary research that was published, I think a year prior, in Research Team 331 that was originally published as Front-End Engineering Design. So both are good to check out and will have valuable information for you. So Mike, maybe this might be a good place to pause and see if you kind of have any questions that Valerie and I can answer before we get into the part 2 of the webinar.
Sure, we do. One question, due to the shortfall in face-to-face interaction, are companies changing the way they document planning efforts, or are they simply re-emphasizing existing documentation and record-keeping protocols?
In general, I believe that we're doing things much as we have in the past. I think some of the ways that we're meeting is perhaps changing how that information is stored and shared. We're using team meeting platform, for example, as a way to share documents so that we can modify them, as a group. But generally speaking, our document control practices are unchanged.
Yeah, that might be the type of thing. It just takes another 6 months or so for it to work itself through, that people acknowledge the change, and maybe in the next year's budgeting cycle that ends up being a priority to address too.
Okay. One company says, we have found that reviewing the accuracy criteria with the team early in the FEL process helps better understanding of what makes for a quality project environment. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
I would agree with that. What we do is we use the other CII tool. It's the alignment thermometer. And a lot of the questions are very similar. We try to do the alignment thermometer once in FEL2 and again in FEL3 to kind of gauge, how the extended team is working together. So yeah, I think it would be very comparable to that, but more of a workshop type environment. That's a great idea.
How do you verify the objectivity of the accuracy definition scoring?
I've always found the project leaders to be pretty open and honest. I don't ever really worry about the scores so much. The actual score that comes out. I mean, it's good to be able to provide an overall assessment in a package that's going to go to leadership for funding approval. to show how you benchmark against other projects in the portfolio. But I usually look for those individual nuggets of information that come out of the discussions around the elements. That's where, you know, I think the value is. So I don't worry so much about the actual number that's assigned to various elements. I don't know, Sandra, what do you think about that?
Well, I was kind of reflecting on how do you make sure it's objective. You and I have both used the technique of actually asking the engineering contractor that's in the room what their feeling was in terms of the processes and how well they were followed or how well they were defined that the owner had provided them. So kind of having the opportunity, it requires you to have a safe environment that they feel open to share that, but that's part of that smaller group. That's been one technique I think that's been really effective to get that objectivity at the table.
I agree with that. In fact, during a recent session, I actually started with the second grouping of questions, which is more team-based,
okay,
and asked the questions directly of the engineering company first before we started the owner question bank. And I felt like there was a lot of objectivity, but I haven't really experienced a problem in that area.
Okay, thanks. Kind of continuing that theme a little bit, do the poorer scoring criteria find their way onto a project risk register or issues register for tracking and resolution?
Well, you know, our documented procedures are that the action items that come out of any of our project assurance processes, which PDRI is one of them, they have to be formally incorporated into what we can call a gap closure plan. And that gap closure plan has to be stewarded by the site supervisor to closure. So that's, I'm not sure that's what the question was, but that's, I agree. You absolutely have to follow up on the actions and drive them to closure. But that said, you know, not every action that gets identified in the PDRI has the same value towards risk reduction. So we do encourage our PMs to, you know, put that additional thought into it. And if there are some actions of lower importance, you know, then we do handle those separately.
Yeah, I think I've seen good examples come out of the accuracy factors that were added to the risk register. They weren't necessarily actions that the team could change, but they were definitely risks that needed to be managed. One of the good examples that I had was a team where they had seconded the senior project manager and some of the senior engineering resources through the front-end planning phase from one of their sister companies. And that small group was going to depart the team when they headed into the execution phase. So there was definitely some risk in terms of loss of knowledge and experience on the team that came through the discussion that ended up on the risk register. And, you know, hopefully there's some good mitigating actions that could be taken as a follow-up.
Valerie, are the projects most, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say along those same lines that, you know, looking at it from that perspective, you know, I've also seen gaps in what I would consider more matrix type organizations where functional groups aren't collaborating as effectively as necessary, say perhaps construction management versus project engineering. And so that has led to some very successful, you know, follow-up actions as well. So much along the line of what Sandra noted there.
Okay, Valerie, are most of the projects that you are talking about that you've referenced, are they brownfield or greenfield?
You know, the vast majority of the projects we do are retrofit type revamp jobs. Not a lot of greenfield, some, but not a lot.
Okay. There are a couple questions here about who would you include in the core group for the accuracy session and how many people?
So my smallest group might be 2. It would be the PM from the engineering group, from the engineering office, and the PM from the project. But usually I encourage the leaders from their respective organizations. So Oftentimes it's that business lead contact on the engineering contractor side who's responsible for, managing the relationship between our respective organizations. And then the supervision on the project engineering owner side, or perhaps the sponsor of the project. So depending, if it's a $100 million type project, you're going to get more interaction and involvement than a $25 million project.
What's the bottom line takeaway you give the project team when you have the accuracy score?
So we go through the full bank, and then we always, at the conclusion of both the PDRI and the accuracy session, go back to revisit the low scoring areas and just kind of validate that we're all in alignment and that what we've documented is consistent with the message that we all have agreed to. So I think that would be the bottom line, is just driving consensus on what's going to appear in the final report, that everybody's in agreement with those findings.
Okay, I think one more. As part of project closeout, are the PDRI results tied back to the actual project results? And what lessons learned can you share?
I don't think we're that mature that we've done that at project closeout yet. I don't know, I'll defer that to Sandra.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the greatest areas of opportunity within the industry, and kind of some of the most exciting conversations that we've been having over the past 6 months has been we've got so much data that we can leverage in terms of areas that scored really well or areas that didn't score so well. How do we start to leverage machine learning and AI technologies to be able to take that data and be able to drive learnings from it? It doesn't replace the human element from lessons learned, but it certainly gives us a lot more objective information that we can use as we look at project results. So I'm quite excited on that, but I would say there's lots of room for improvement in the industry.
Yeah, I think, on a more fundamental basis, where we're at, annually, we'll take a look at the PDRI findings and try to identify those, top 5 areas that scored the lowest across the board, and, try to develop action planning and initiatives to improve performance in those areas across our system. But, long-term PDRI, it would be a great benchmarking metric to, use in our overall analysis of project outcome. We're just not that far. We've got those activities under development, but haven't actually fully implemented them yet.
Okay, that's all we have for now.
All right, well, that was a pretty good lineup. I'm glad we paused, Mike, to go through those. Again, well, we'll maybe do a condensed version of part 2 on the virtual facilitation best practices, but we'll share some of the best tips that we have so far. So the first slide, Tyler, if we can move over to talking about preparation. And I think the good news is the steps to prepare for a successful PDRI session, they haven't really changed, but there's certainly some new items on the checklist that we're all doing to make virtual experiences work well. Location considerations in terms of spanning multiple time zones, and when does it become dinner for people that might be on your call. Even thinking through, where are all of my participants located, and are we going to have any internet bandwidth or quality issues that we need to work through. I think group size is still an important one to keep your eye on, and just like in person, it's still really difficult to handle a group of greater than 20 participants. So that's one to watch. I think if we switch over to the attendee preparation, this is probably one of those checklist items that we've seen had to expand. Valerie, I know when we talked in preparing for this webinar, you shared a little bit about you had to add an item for the technology guidelines and rules of engagement to make virtual sessions consistent for your people. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of just the technology itself. Like, our VPN really bogs everything down, telling people to log out of the VPN before they participate in the session. Audio quality, super important. If a person can't talk or hear well in a call, it really, it's a showstopper. So, having people call in with their phones versus using their headset, especially if their Wi-Fi at their home isn't, perhaps as speedy as would be desirable. And then, other silly things like barking dogs and such, making sure that you're always on mute if you're not talking, a lot of things along those lines. But the other thing is some of the people who are in PDRIs are more cross-functional and they're not used to the virtual environment. So, we do try to start out with a little bit of a, what buttons do you push? And if you're having a problem like that looks like this, what would you do about it? A little bit of dialogue around that to just get things kicked off.
Yeah, very good. All right, well, let's move over to our next one here, and we'll go through it fairly quickly. One of the areas my team has focused on in the past number of months is how to really make use the meeting platform that we're using to its fullest potential. And one of the things you can consider is your tool may have the ability to set up different layouts that can align with different segments or parts of your meeting. So some of the examples where we've leveraged that was putting together the ideal layout for the meeting lobby when people first arrive, hopefully 10 minutes early for the session, making sure you've got a good one for the break and an ideal one for the PDRI session itself. So just one that you can keep in mind. The next slide here, talking through session agenda. This is one where things are changing month by month, at least from my perspective. When we did our first virtual PDRIs in April, we were experiencing about a 30% increase in the time to actually do a PDRI. But 5 months later, everyone's getting better at virtual meetings, and we're experiencing this less and less in terms of a challenge with each month that goes by. So I'd say that's encouraging. Introductions are still super important, and kind of the approach we've taken is to encourage everybody to share their video during introductions, but then allowing them to turn, or suggesting actually that they turn it off to go through the balance of the PDRI session, because this is one of those sessions where you got to really focus on details, and the less distraction there is on the screen, I think the easier it is for everybody to focus on those details. I think one of the final ones on the session agenda is just kind of how challenging it is with participant fatigue. And there's just way too many weeks where it's Wednesday and I'm already zoomed out. And I don't think it's the PDRI session itself that's the problem. It's how many meetings did they go to before your session got onto their agenda that week. So just something to keep in mind, and maybe it's a matter of pushing the PDRI sessions earlier in the week and not leaving them till Friday. Okay, so I think kind of the last one that we've got here is that we've just kind of had a lot of learnings, some great sharing that's taking place across that PDRI facilitator community, and Valerie and I kind of picked out a few really good ones that we thought would be good to share. So Valerie, you've got a great one here around how do you do the equivalent of an attendance sheet at an in-person meeting. Do you want to share kind of how you do that?
Yeah, so I was having difficulty tracking, who was actually participating in the meeting, and I needed to know their roles. I just can't write all that down, and the chat box, for a bunch of people can be really difficult. So we've been creating Microsoft Forms. It's, it comes with the Office 365 suite. You can create a nice little, questionnaire where they could put their last name, their first name, their email address, the project role. You can just not worry about it. And after you've facilitated your session, you can go download it in Excel format. Saves me a bunch of time.
Yeah,
so I use that all the time.
That's a great one. I really like that. How about polls? Like we used the poll here today to kind of reach out and engage. Is that something you've been able to leverage in PDRI sessions?
Yeah, so we use Teams a lot, and the team polling wasn't really working out for me. So again, I use Microsoft Forms to create a PDRI poll. I've preloaded all the definitions, and I use it when I think it's additive. So I tried polling just about every other question, and my PDRI session got way longer than it had historically been. So what I do is, if I have a question where there seems to be some disagreement, or I feel like people aren't responding, they're not talking, I'll put a poll out there and ask them to score the elements. And it's interesting because you get a lot more engagement that way. So I don't use it on every question, but I strategically use it when I think it adds value.
Yeah. We found the same thing, that some of the meeting platforms that we were working with for our clients, the polling was just really challenging. So one of the solutions we used was called Poll Everywhere. And same principle, it's just a simple web page that people can pull up on their phone. And as a facilitator, you can share it really quickly as well. Mm-hmm. All right, well, we're almost at time. So I think we'll transition over here to wrap things up. So just kind of some summary tips here from a PDRI. If you're a PDRI facilitator, I think these are all points that you would have done in person, but coming prepared, I think biggest takeaway for me is focusing on understanding everybody's roles. And if you know the roles before you get into that session, it's just that much easier to reach out and engage people. Connecting visually, really important, that you set things up so that you can be looking into the webcam and maintaining eye contact, minimizing distractions. So again, figuring out how that workspace is going to be free of distractions for that 4-hour duration, super important. And then I think voice, just using inflections, pace, pitch, all the good practices you'd also use for in-person sessions. Very good. So one of the things that we had a lot of requests for was, can you summarize up a bunch of these tips? Because we need help, and we put together this guide to facilitating virtual PDRI sessions. I think it went out in June. So if that's something that would be helpful to you, feel free to download that, valencyinc.com/virtual-PDRI. Very good. So I guess to summarize and really kind of do a quick recap on our webinar objectives, we started with the question, how do we leverage the latest PDRI innovations and virtual technologies in the face of COVID-19? So we've had an opportunity to share and to validate the most significant challenges that organizations are facing here in front-end planning. I'd like to extend a big thank you to you, Valerie, for helping us highlight some of the risk areas that we can anticipate and how we can kind of use a lot of the PDRI elements and accuracy factors to help identify those. We've shared our experience and how you can look at using the accuracy factors, regardless of whether you're using industrial PDRI templates or not. And finally, we've shared what we've learned so far on virtual facilitation best practices, but I think this is going to be a pretty rapidly maturing skill set across our industry. And I think there's a lot more to come in the years ahead for discussion on this topic. So with that, Mike, I will pass it back to you to go through any questions that you have.
Okay, we have one question specifically about virtual sessions. How do you read the body language of the PDRI participants?
You go ahead first, Valerie. Okay. Well, silence is, a big item. I try to know what role people have and just start calling people out by name if, I'm not getting engagement. But really, yeah, body language is a tough one because we don't tend to keep people on the camera. So silence is what I'm looking for.
This was a really hard one for me because I think I've always relied on that body language to help kind of read what was going on in a room. And I'd say it probably took me till about June to realize that, well, at least with the groups that I work with, the extroverts will load up the chat box and they're very easy to identify if they've got something to say, even if you can't see their body language. But the introverts in the group are still going to be quiet and still hold back. But what I have noticed is that if you just watch the microphone, if everyone's muted when they're not speaking, those that have something to say but maybe won't speak up, they'll turn their microphone on and they'll be trying to wait for a place to say something. So if you just call them out when you see the microphone unmute, that's something that's been helping to kind of compensate for the body language that we can't read.
Okay, well, that's about all the time we have for today. Thank you all very much for joining us. We appreciate your time. We hope you enjoyed the webinar. And thank you to Sandra, and thank you to Valerie for providing this great conversation. We really appreciate that. Don't forget to check out our events page to sign up for future webinars. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Mike.
Great. Bye-bye.